All right, we have Kelly, Servinka, Amaya, Beckham, present, Nuzo Erickson,
Yep.
Forrest, she's not here, Albert, Gramlich, McMillan, she's not here.
Thank you. So the next, do you have any amendments to our agenda? Did everyone have a chance to look over it? Do you have any amendments? No. Thank you. So the next we have on our agenda for today is the approval of submitted reports. Unfortunately, we do not have our February meeting minutes or our March, so we're going to move that to May. We will have them for May to approve for everyone. The next item that we have, I just want to get through these quickly because we do have a lot to cover today, is to talk about our Saga Group presentation that came forward to us last couple of months and talk about what we wanted to do moving forward with the group. We did have a brief discussion last month, but unfortunately we didn't have a consensus. So today we are hoping to discuss the group and the proposal and come to a consensus about how the group would like to move forward. Lisa, did you want to give us a brief recap about the group?
I think, yeah, so Saga came in and Sunny's actually here to present a wonderful idea about how to be more inclusive in Geneva. And it was specifically around having gender-neutral restrooms. And so going around to businesses where it would be easy enough for them, and I can hear myself too, to have the signage changed. So I think the issue boiled down to not whether or not we think it's a good idea, but if we actually have the authority to give any funds. So I think the last place we left it was we can help with fundraising and we can give resources in terms of human power to this and have it in our strategic plan to make sure that we make room for this, but we don't know that we can actually, unfortunately, allocate funds. And that's the last I heard.
Yep, thank you. That's where we were sitting with it, and what we were looking for from the group is to determine what members from our task force would be willing to work specifically with the Saga group, so we can continue to move forward with the process, and to just commit ourselves to helping with fundraising, helping with benchmarking, and assisting the group, and potentially moving on from there. Do we have members of the group that are interested in volunteering to step up for this role?
Yeah.
Lisa? Christine and Silva as well? Okay, at this time, we can only have 3 members participating with the group just because of the rules that we have being a public organization. So we do have Lisa and Christine and Silva for the record for that.
All right.
Thank you. So if I could ask you guys moving forward, we'll put in our agenda every month to receive an update from you of where we're looking, just to make sure that the group is being supported, that you're being supported by the DEI, and just to see where you guys are with the initiative.
Okay.
Thank you. Did you want to have Sunny speak for a few minutes, Lisa?
Did you
While we're
want
on
to
the
say anything?
topic?
Do you want to address the group? Sure.
You
Yeah,
can come up to the front.
Thank you.
Could we ask you to speak more into the microphones? We're having
You have a trouble.
problems hearing.
Thank you for letting us know. We will. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. We don't usually use the microphone, so we're not used to it, but thank you.
Right, I know the feeling.
Sonny, is there a mic on? Is there a button to put the mic on? In front of the microphone. Should be
I don't-
on gold. Sorry.
I think that means it's on.
Yes.
So since we came here in February, the next phase of the plan that we've started was actually collecting data on the restrooms that are in downtown Geneva. So far we have analyzed, I think, 20-ish restrooms. We started at the end of 3rd Street and just started moving our way back. So far we found 6 restrooms. We did create a list of criteria that would qualify for, here I have them. We selected 2 stickers that we think would be good. This one says this bathroom is for everyone. This would be to identify a restroom that is gender neutral. This one says the same thing. It also has the wheelchair symbol to indicate that it's available for handicapped people. So we did find 6 businesses with restrooms that do qualify for one of those 2 stickers in that very small sample there. We also found, I think, 3 or 4 other businesses that check off all the items in the list except for the correct signage. So their bathrooms are all good, they're acceptable, they just haven't been labeled correctly. So the 2 parts of our plan that we need assistance with are funds for purchasing stickers for all the businesses, as well as looking into a grant that would provide money to buy and install the correct signs on all the businesses that need them. The other part we need is really guidance in collecting more data and reaching out to these business owners. Unfortunately, it's a really long and difficult process getting this information business by business. And if there's any way the council could help us reach out to these businesses and have them sort of self-report, yes, we have a single stall restroom. Yes, it's publicly available. Yes, it's labeled correctly. That would really speed things up, as well as a way to contact them once we've gotten this data and ask their permission to, if they want to participate, if they want to put the sticker in, and if they're interested in changing their sign. If we do have a significant number of businesses that are, willing to change their sign, we were hoping to look into using funds to purchase the signs, and then hopefully getting businesses kind of teaching themselves to swap out the sign. It's not a difficult process, or members of Saga going out to each of these businesses who needs a sign and replacing it for them. So I guess the update is basically we started collecting data with a very small sample size. We have good results indicating that these restrooms do exist in Geneva. They're available to transgender, gender nonconforming, and handicapped people. We just need to identify them, which should be relatively straightforward.
Thank you, Sunny.
Yep.
A suggestion for you guys also moving forward, I did reach out to the Geneva Chamber of Commerce when we first started the conversation, and they're interested in working with you, but they were still waiting basically for feedback of what their role could be and what our role was going to be and what Saga's role was going to be. So as far as getting to know the businesses and things like that and reaching out to the businesses, the Geneva Chamber of Commerce could be a good resource for you guys too.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sunny.
Yep.
Do any members of the DEI have further questions for Sunny or other comments on the topic? Silva, if you could just make sure you turn your microphone on, please. Thank you.
Excellent idea, partnering with the Chamber of Commerce. They already have the relationships with the business, and they can help facilitate something like this. I think that's a big positive.
Thank you. Do you have any other comments on the Saga group for now? Okay, thank you. So do we have a consensus that we are going to move forward with providing DEI task members to help with fundraising and with moving forward with any of the on-ground, working with businesses, working with the chamber? Do we have a consensus for that? Do we have any opposition from the DEI group at this time? Okay, then we will be moving forward, as we've stated, with helping with fundraising and getting boots on the ground to help with the businesses. As I said, Silva, Christine, and Lisa will be working with them. Thank you.
Sure.
The next item that we have on our agenda today is mostly what we're here to discuss today is our listening session and moving forward with our strategic planning. I just want to start this session by thanking all the members of the DEI and Mira especially for all the time we've put in so far. We've established a mission, we've listened to members of the community, we've learned to structure our meetings so that we can bring in members of the community to have these conversations, and I do feel that we have been making an impact in our community with the awareness of the group, which is represented today by the members that we have here of our community that want to participate. And I just want to say that moving forward, we're very grateful for everyone's commitment so far. And I do want to remind everyone that we are not a political organization. We will be moving forward with all of our comments with kindness and with genuine curiosity, but not being abrupt. And we are not a political organization. All right.
All right. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So with that, I think what the format should be is that the group have been meeting diligently for the last 8 to 9 months. They've identified through conversations with community partners and participants who have come to meetings. They have identified areas of focus that we believe that Geneva needs to look at when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I also want to say we have 7 people that have joined us via webinar, and so they also have an opportunity to unmute themselves or raise their hand to participate. So I think a good idea would be for people to come up to the podium or unmute themselves and give their ideas about what they feel Geneva needs in terms of to be a welcoming community, for people to have a sense of belonging in the community. And there are things that we're doing a great job at, and there are areas where we could improve. And so I think the focus tonight is to just listen, add to this list or take away from this list, listen to your opinions. And then once we also plan on doing community surveys and doing other listening sessions in the future. Once we gather all that data, the idea is that we would get a facilitator to come up with a plan based on what you say is important or what you think Geneva needs. So with that, we'll invite comments from people, and we'll take notes. I can also add to this list, or and then at our next meeting or another meeting, we can distill it down and move forward. So this is one of many listening sessions.
It is about 10 to 7 at this point, so we were willing to dedicate probably an hour to the listening session today. So if members of the public are interested, then please step forward. We have set aside a lot of time for this today.
Someone's got to get us started.
Hi, my name is Michelle Rathman. This is my first time at this session at the invitation of another person I just met over the summer in Geneva. My work focuses on health equity, as a matter of fact. I specialize in under-resourced, underprivileged, underrepresented rural communities, and bringing forth really a couple clear understandings about the difference between equity and inclusion and diversity and also equality. I have the privilege of kind of using the framework of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, which is that your zip code should not matter about the access to services that you have. So I'm just curious about the identified target focus areas. Has there been any framework put to the discussion about, specific items that float to the surface? Because city practices is big. It's a big topic, as is housing, as is youth mentoring, early childhood support, parent support, and things like that. Because I also bring framework with me as well to create a plan to dive into each one of these things to ensure that 100% of the people in any particular county or city have 100% of what they need, which are the 5 surviving services and the 5 thriving services, and all of these things fall into that framework. So I have a lot of resources, a lot of ideas that are many times are unsolicited, I realize, but I'm just curious if there's been any framework about, we talk about it, but do you have any kind of structure put to what you're hoping to accomplish through listening sessions, and that might help guide the conversation and more productively?
Sure. So I think basically we don't have a specific framework, and that's what we're looking to do. So we've identified in the meetings that we've had that we represent the community, but we are not the community. We do need to extend out into community partners, into active residents, into business owners, into youth, into a lot of aspects so that we can put together a specific framework. We basically we fully admit that we don't represent the full needs of the community, and we don't know what the full needs of the community are. When the city council established the DEI task force, they pretty much said, from my understanding, we don't really know what we want you to do. Can you help us figure it out? So at this point, we are not sure what the framework looks like. We're not sure what our role will be with the city. Honestly, we are given a 2-year time, actually. And at that point, the city may decide that we no longer need DEI, or they may give us more things to do. We're not entirely sure. So thank you for your comments, and thank you for the work that you do. But to answer your question specifically, we do not have a specific framework. We are looking for community partners, community input, as much input as we can possibly receive so that we can formulate a framework that is inclusive and that is detailed and that is also efficient. One thing that we have identified in the multiple conversations that we've had in our meetings is this is a very broad and inclusive topic. And we use that word inclusive so much that it almost doesn't even have merit anymore. At one point, do you prioritize things? So that's what we're hoping to take on and accomplish in the time that we have, the 2-year term that we have. And if anyone has more resources or opinions, we would love to hear them, most definitely. I'd like to offer at this time as well, I'm the chair of the committee, and I do meet at the library, becoming more regularly with community members one-on-one, so that you can voice your professional affiliations or your opinions or your thoughts or your your time in Geneva and your experiences in Geneva, so that I can have a better understanding of your experiences in a broad sense, and then kind of efficiently bring those ideas to the group. So definitely love to sit down with you if you're interested, and learn more about what you have found in our community and even the communities that border us, so we can specifically work on that framework. Thank you. Does anyone else have other comments at this time?
Essentially, that's where we're at. That's what we're doing. We're trying to get to our focus. We're trying to narrow that focus. So we want to hear from people what they think is important or what they think we should focus on. We do have somebody that is online that wants to speak. I can go ahead and unmute him, and if you could state your name and go ahead and make your comments.
Oh, hi. My name is Brian. My pronouns are he, him. I'm not sure if I'm not the only one online, so if I'm not the right one you wanted to talk, let me know. And
No,
I'll
it's you,
stop.
Brian. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I appreciate the effort and the work that the committee is putting into and preparing to put into this. I've been on a lot of EDI committees at work and in other spaces, so I know that it is a difficult thing to do. So I'm a Black man. I live in Geneva. There aren't a lot of us that I see around, and I just want to bring up, I think, two incidents that might support. I don't know if I make it a request, but a question I would have. So, last fall, I was just walking down the street, just going for a walk in the afternoon, getting my COVID steps in, and a white woman in a car pulled over and faux politely asked me, "Oh, where did you get those sunglasses?" Like that doesn't happen. That was policing me. That was profiling me. Like, I wasn't wearing weird sunglasses. Okay. The other incident that occurred is one of my neighbors is a white woman, and because she disputed where I should park my car, she threatened to call the cops on me. And I think we know that, and the car was parked on property that my landlord owns. And it's undisputed. Like, this is not like a thing to ask. There's no question to ask here. And the history of that is that white people imperil Black people's lives simply by making complaints to figures of authority. And so I bring this up because then the last conversations that I've had with what I'll say are the leadership of the community of Geneva have not been fruitful in emphasizing the importance of race and ethnicity in these conversations. The 2018, maybe 2019 listening session that the Geneva City Council held at where you are today went, in my view, terribly because of how it patted the backs of white residents for just having a conversation rather than actually having any real discussion about race. That this all, to me, all speaks to a lack of a trajectory of this city actually addressing the issue of racism in a clear way. And so I think I'm finishing up here, don't worry. I think if you don't prioritize a topic, then you know that it's not going to sort of magically eventually get priority, right? Like, you have to be upfront and say, this is something we care about. And so I guess I would ask the task force to consider including race and ethnicity as an area of focus, because that pervades our lives just like my gender and my sexuality pervades my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, for your comments, and I just want to especially thank you for being brave enough to speak in an open forum like this about your experiences in Geneva. Even though they have been negative, this is important information for the DEI to take into consideration when we're making our objectives, and it's also so important for us to hear from the members of our community, like I said, even if it is a negative comment. So I just want to thank you specifically for being brave enough to step forward in a community forum.
Okay, so
Thank
how
you.
do I turn this on? There's no red light. Is it on? Yes. Okay, thank you. I want to kind of piggyback onto Brian's remarks.
Ma'am, if you could just state your first name for
Oh,
us.
I'm sorry, sure. Pat Engel.
Thank you.
I've been a resident here for 47 years, same house, and I've seen a lot of changes over the years. We used to have a much more diverse community as far as housing and affordability. The reason I mention that is because I think it piggybacks on the whole race issue. Every time there's a suggestion of affordable housing in this community, the backlash is, oh my God, these people from Aurora are coming up here, which is code for people of color or people of a different ethnicity. But my own personal story, and what I don't see on your listing, is police and staff training. A couple of years ago, I was on my way to a meeting in Batavia, and I was driving down Route 31, and it was probably 6:30 in the evening, and there was a young man of color, and he was walking down the middle of Route 31, which was kind of alarming to me because obviously he didn't know where he was going or what the situation would be on 31, where it narrows. And I thought, well, maybe he's trying to find his way to the or the train station. There are no sidewalks there. And I thought, should I call the police to maybe assist him? I didn't feel like I could stop in the middle of the road and help anybody. But I thought, no, I don't think I can call the police. I'm not sure what the police reaction would be to a young black man coming into Geneva at 6:30 at night, apparently lost or disorientated or something. And that gave me a really ugly feeling in my heart that I couldn't. And I'm not saying the Geneva police would have done anything wrong. I just don't know. And I don't know what kind of training is happening on the level of in the schools, in the police department, in the fire department, to deal with situations that are maybe uncommon to us. But I go back to my other big issue is affordable housing in this community, which is non-existent anymore. And partly it's because people like to be surrounded by people of their own ilk. I mean, it's more comfortable. The unknown is scary, and we're not willing to take that risk. And I remember about 3 years ago at the Unitarian Church, it was just before COVID, they had a meeting and they brought in 2 people that talked about affordable housing. And darn, if they can figure this out on the North Shore, I think we can figure it out here without it being threatening to people, but welcoming to all people. It's a great community. Why shouldn't we be open and inviting to everyone? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and for your thoughts. Thank you.
We have somebody online, Stu Steyer, that raised her hand.
Hi, this is Sue, and I just want to say I agree with what Brian and Pat said. When I looked at the identified areas of focus, I didn't see race listed, and I think that would be an important area to include. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Sir.
Hi everyone, my name is Edward Manning. I'm a 35-year resident of Geneva, and I am also a leader with the Fox River Valley Initiative, which is a broad-based community organizing group in Kane County. We represent about 20 institutions up and down the Fox River. The 3 things that jump out at me, and a lot of them were just addressed by you, community policing. I have a black man who's a colleague of mine. He came from Chicago for a meeting at Fox Valley Presbyterian Church on East Side Drive, and told me when he saw me that evening that he had been followed by the police when he was driving through Geneva. I have no reason to doubt him. I trust him. I believe him. So I think that speaks to training. Our police officers need training. We have a wonderful, wonderful police force here in Geneva. They give me tickets when I deserve them. They're always, they come into my neighborhood, Sterling Manor. This is not to cast any aspersions on our police department, but training, I think, is very necessary in the area of race. Another thing that kind of jumped out at me is community partnerships with schools. All three of my children are now out of the Geneva school system and on their own as young adults. But so I'm not involved as I used to be in our school process in Geneva, in Kane County. But I see a lot of things and I hear a lot of things, and it's scary for me as a longtime resident. I don't like to see my community go in that direction. I think that we really need, if we're going to have this discussion, we need to really have it in our school system. And the last thing, and something that the Fox River Valley Initiative is very involved in, is housing. Affordable housing is pretty rare in our community. I want to put a shout out to the people, and one of them is here behind me tonight, who worked so hard to get Emma's Landing passed and built. It's pretty close to being built right now. That's in Sterling Manor, right around the corner from where we live. We supported that initiative and are very happy that it's going up. But more needs to be done in housing. And like you said, when people talk about water problems and traffic problems and density problems, those are not the problems they're talking about. There are other problems that they don't want to come out and say. So I think we really need to address housing in our community. I'm so glad that this committee has been formed. I had the opportunity to sit down with Kevin Burns, I don't know, about 8 or 9 months ago, and was delighted, and my wife as well were delighted when we heard that this was going to be taken on. So thank you all for doing this, and good luck as you go forward.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Thank you.
My name is Larry Davidson, and I'm a resident of Geneva for about 20 years now, and I have a personal story which kind of goes back to the issue of affordable housing and just housing in general. I belong to a local gym, and my trainer happens to be African American, and she lived in Batavia, and she was going to relocate, and she had targeted Geneva, and she went to the bank, and the mortgage officer kind of just said, you know, you can get more bang for your buck in Elgin or Aurora or some other area, and really kind of tried to discourage her from going to Geneva. So it was a subtle indication of redlining. But she stuck to her guns, proud for her, and she ended up buying a place here in Geneva, and her kids have gone to middle school and have adapted very well, but it just goes to show that there's strength in diversity, and that improves our community if we have more people of color, different cultures. And I'm, like the lady over here, very well spoken about, you know, we live in a community that's very affluent, but yet we have a lot to share in terms of our culture and our community experience. I just think we need to look at housing and perhaps reach out to the Realtor Association and see what they're doing. And are they aware of the banking industry practices? Because it's still rampant. When you look at news articles, you see news articles where blacks, Indians, or whatever are paying higher mortgage rates. They're being kicked out of their homes more frequently. So I think we need to engage the Realtor Association too. So.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Again, Michelle Rathman. As I sit here and I think about what's so challenging is the first steps, and you already have done that by forming this committee, but then what will be the meaningful next steps? And for as many stories as people share, it does not populate a data field. So I think maybe one thing to think about is, with whatever authority you have or whatever funding might be provided as a part of this endeavor, and maybe it's through some community partnerships, that there be some really significant community surveying going on. Understand through very scientific measures what the issues are with respect to city practices, working with an agency that specializes in doing community surveying around these issues, making sure we get the language right. Once you get the data, then you can create the communication for community engagement. Because communication weaves through all of these things. It doesn't matter what decisions or policies are made if it's not communicated in a way that every person understands, whether it's cultural differences, gender, whether it's generational, because every generation believes themselves to be smarter than the one that came before it or the one that will certainly come after. So we have that at work as well. And then really understand the data then drives the decision making about what is the next step And with that, bringing together community stakeholder groups to have open discussions about, first and foremost, just having comfortable conversations about what all this, some people say Black or African American, or we stumble over these things because we want to do it right. And so having the data that backs up the stories and then creating a plan based on what information is coming your way, I think maybe is a potential next step in this journey of making Geneva, it on paper sounds great, but if it's not the lived experience of those who come here and want to call it home, the piece of paper it's written on is worthless.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you.
We have another comment online by Brian.
Hi, thank you again. I want to appreciate one of the early comments that one of the organizers said about how the term inclusion has the potential to lose meaning. I think there's a good argument to be made for how inclusion as it's currently presented often next to the words diversity and equity often actually just means assimilation. And I think it is important for the Geneva community to think deeply about that. One of the phrases that I've heard over the last, it'll be about 10 years this fall that I've lived in Geneva, is the character of Geneva. We don't want to change or mess with what the character of Geneva is. And I find that phrasing, even by itself, hearing it over and over again, to be highly problematic. And I hear a lot of leaders in our community use that phrasing. And the idea that we should be cheering on the people who fight for their place to assimilate in this community, or that the idea of including more people of color, that the purpose of that is to make this community better, that commodifies the bodies and the lives of marginalized people. So I think something that's missing in I've not been able to attend task force meetings, so I'm not commenting on that. But what I think is missing in the conversation in Geneva is a deep reckoning with the willingness of even people who are well-meaning in this community to treat others as lucky to be here and not as people who bring something foundationally to this community, and not even bringing it, but helping it be what it is. This is the shallow approach and the willingness to brush off and be okay with the idea that Geneva has a character that I, as a Black man, though I'm professionally accomplished, will have to assimilate to. I have not seen the leaders in our community take this on in a deep way. And I hope that this task force has a way to hold our full community and the leaders in our community accountable.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for your comments.
Hello. My name is Jim Lyons. I'm a resident of Geneva. There's 2 points, I guess, I'd like to make tonight. One is that I think this is what you're doing tonight is a good idea. Just bringing people in and letting them speak and have an open dialogue with people. I think that's good to do that. I'd also like to talk about reaching out to specific groups. And I know the task force has started doing that, but I'd also encourage more of that. Specifically, I spoke with some people in regards to seniors. And Geneva Township has a senior center. The city, per se, of Geneva does not. And so that's kind of seems odd to me. I don't know, I'm relatively new to this area, but it seems like, there's a distinction, even though the township sits right in the middle of Wheeler Park. in the Park District land, there doesn't seem to be a lot of interaction from what I can observe. So I think it's important to reach out to other organizations, political entities, I guess, to bring them into this process as well, since they're actually in Geneva. The other thing is that there's senior services that's located in the senior center in Wheeler Park. And essentially, senior services, I really didn't know what it is, but it's actually a county-wide entity that provides services for seniors. It's they have the headquarters in Elgin and Aurora, and then subunits, one of which is in Geneva here. And I think they'd be an excellent resource for looking at this issue. In some ways, by reaching out to these different organizations that already exist, you're kind of showing them that you're willing to support them, but you're also you value what they have to say about something they've been working on a subject for a long time. The woman I spoke to today in senior services told me she'd been doing this job for 21 years. She has a lot of information that maybe the task force could utilize in what they're trying to accomplish. The other thing is the actual senior center. I've invited both of them to come down and speak to us. They weren't available tonight, but I expect they will make themselves available in the future. I'd also mention one other time that I think reaching out to religious organizations, different churches, is also a good thing. It's kind of a touchy point because you're kind of overlapping politics with religion and different social issues, and so you're walking on eggs for sure, in my opinion. But I think also there's religious organizations as providing services to different groups of people forever. You know, I don't have any personal knowledge of it, but I hear, for instance, the Salvation Army provides a lot of services. Catholic Charities provides a lot of services. They provide a lot of money to different organizations. And so, like I said, it's I don't want to call it a minefield, but it's something that these people have knowledge, they have resources, they're engaged in the same areas that we're actually looking at, and I believe it'd be good to reach out to them just to hear what they have to say. The other thing I wanted to talk about is in regards to the bathroom issue and signage. I would encourage whoever's involved in that process to make sure that when you're looking at signage, you're also getting professional opinions as what's required by building codes and ADA. ADA I am familiar with. If you're looking at from here to the wall, and that's the sign, then the distance that you're talking here makes the sign has to be a certain size. So if you're looking at a sign from 3 feet away, it only has to be 2 inches. If you're looking at it from here, it's 5 inches. So, just basics, and, proper placement and things like that. The other thing is I'm relatively new to the state, and so I just, in my spare time, I read the law. And I was reading about, the Open Meetings Act. And one of the things I read was that open meetings requirements are required of an organization like this. And then what happens is that even subcommittees are open to, or have to be subject to open meetings. And they're the majority of the majority. So if this is 9, your majority or quorum, I assume, is 5 on this. And then the majority of 5 is 3. So anytime 3 people gets together, then people are invited to come and interact and watch their actions. And they have to keep minutes and things like that. I'm definitely not an expert, but it's one of those things that you probably should look into if you're going to have a group to getting together and there's going to be 3 members, then they might be subject to Open Meetings Act. Okay, that's all I had to say.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. Thank you.
So the sign thing, I said this when you came up and started talking about it. in our work, we recognize that when signs go up, not everyone complies. And so I think with the component of the restroom signs, that there be some really significant training, not just notification to the owners, but to train their staff on how to manage it. We all know how this went when staff were left to make us comply with the rules. So, and the other thing that I'm thinking about that's not on this list because of where I am in my field is the social determinants of health. When we take a look at inequity and the lack of inclusion and diversity and access to things for youth, for seniors, for those with disabilities, for those who are non-binary, what have you, in this country, we know we have a significant problem with there being interference with a person's individual relationship with their healthcare provider. I sit on the Delnor Patient Family Advisory Council, and I think that this would be something that would be interesting to bring to them because they have had members of the library come in and talk about resources for inpatients and whatnot. You have to know that they are, by law, they are being, whether they say they want to, but they're being forced to reckon with the issues of inequity and excluding individuals from accessing the full range of healthcare services based on some of these things. So I happily will tell them about this committee. I would invite them to come here, and I would also invite you, to the permission of quorum, to come and talk to them as well, because I would imagine they have some really viable and valuable resources to help address some of the challenges for our youth in particular and for our seniors and those who are being marginalized in our community. That's probably the last time, but I'm not going to.
No.
Feel free.
Thank you. We invite as many comments as possible. We're only at about 7:15, so we still have at least another half hour for comments, so thank you. Don't ever feel like we're tired of hearing your voice. That's why we're here. We want to hear as many voices as possible for the community, and thank you for the recommendation.
I think Brian would like to speak again.
Hi, thank you. This is more of a question than a comment. What I've noticed in a lot of different spaces is that there are institution-based efforts. So I'm thinking particularly about my workplace. There are individuals and even departments that can be charged with creating change of the kind that I think we're talking about tonight when it comes to justice and equity. However, that is often at odds with the other roles that they play in that institution. For example, in human resources, I think there are often conflicts there. And I think that's driven by the fact that we need to have disruption of our institutions. Like the policies have to change and things have to change for things to change. And it's hard to be in both spaces at once. And so given with that framing, I'm wondering, has the task force what has the task force thought about enabling or helping give agency to other members of the community to be disruptive, to be able to push on the policies that some of the institution in our community is not willing to push on. For example, what if we were to help people who are, say, late high school to in their early 20s or in other spaces in their lives to understand how power dynamics and activism works, so that they have a different or another perspective on how to advocate that is not necessarily tied to an institution. I'm wondering if something like that has been part of what you've been thinking about. Thank you.
So thank you for your comments, Brian. I think if I understand correctly what you're asking, you're kind of asking about a piece that we would be looking at producing some kind of community engagement that's safe and welcoming to address very specific issues that are politically motivated often and politically propagandized, I guess is a better word. We have discussed opportunities to work in community engagement, and we have discussed the fact that we understand a lot of the issues that we are working on are controversial and political. At this time, the task force does not have a specific initiative forward that we are going to be engaging with the community. But yes, it is something that we have discussed, and it is something that we do need guidance on to ensure that we do it sensitively, but also productively and efficiently. So does that answer your question?
I think so. Maybe I'll just add a finer point to it just to make sure that I'm being clear enough. I think that agitation and activism has a natural role in every community, and being able to call into question and having a strong voice in calling into question what the policies are that are being set forth, and sort of being outside the system. I think that's an important role that a lot of our community members can play, especially when they can't play a role, say within government or within other pieces of it. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of our communities don't have, like, I learned activism late in life, and I think that as if activism can catch all the words, but I learned those skills later in my life, and I think that if people were learning them earlier in life, they would know how to wield them at the times when they do. And it's a bit of a long shot, but I'm looking for places where young people can learn those tools, I guess. And that's what I'm trying to get at. You may have answered that and I just didn't understand it, so I apologize, but yeah, thank you.
Yes, go ahead. Oh, you turned it off, so turn it.
It is on, okay. So, Brian, what I would say to that is I think Sunny and the Saga group at the high school are a perfect example of where we've encouraged activism. So we don't have a, official way to help in terms of being empowered by a policy of the city, et cetera, but we have a student representative here, Christine, from the high school, and she has helped us identify activist groups that want to work with us, and so we are volunteering our time outside of this, even if we don't have official resources, to say, we see you raising your hand. This is behavior that we would love to support, because we do oftentimes have to go around things that we can't go through. So I hear your point, and I think that's absolutely what we should be encouraging.
Thank you.
This comment falls into the focus of city practices, and I think that if you want to encourage diversity, we probably should encourage diversity in our workforce within the community. One of them being the school system, and two, policing. My wife is a retired teacher from Geneva, excellent school system, but all of her colleagues are pretty much white, college-educated people, of course, but I don't see any effort on their part to really improve selection. So I'm not sure what their procedures or policies are, but maybe we can reach out to them and talk to them about, are you recruiting minority candidates? What's your current status, especially in the police force? I think policing right now is really a hotbed. We're seeing a lot of people being pulled over, Black Americans, for no reason at all, and next thing you know, they're shot. It's very scary. So I think we really need to probably focus in on policing first, then perhaps filter down into the school system.
Thank you.
Probably, not certainly. This is after a long day too, but this is an exciting conversation to me, because it's probably long overdue. We call them long overdue courageous conversations. As I scroll through Google, I type in Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, City of Philadelphia, Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, building an inclusive government that reflects its community in a city where race is not a determinant to success. And so I wonder, because I'm new to this party, the charge of the city of even forming the council, I wonder what their overall objective was. Is it more exploratory to just kind of test the waters and see if there's an interest in having these conversations? Number one, I'm curious about that. And number two, has there been any discussion that anyone in this room knows of as to whether or not Geneva has in its plans through this great visionary work to even develop and put into the city budget an Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion? Because nothing speaks more about how serious a community is than if they actually have the practice within their own walls. And so I'd just be curious if anyone can answer those two questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to speak to the committee being formed and the purpose behind that, and I can speak more about city practices.
Yes.
Okay, so it's been a little bit of time, we've been doing this for 9 months or so going back to how the university of Cleveland was formed. It was born and bred from Mayor Burns. It was an initiative that he placed on the strategic planning advisory committee because he recognized that the city of Geneva was looking for it. They desperately wanted it. They had conversations with residents, with individuals within the town that said this is something that's important to us as a town. It was also part of that strategic plan that was created. And so we tasked the strategic planning advisory committee. Oh, I'm not on. There you go. I was just projecting. So it was task of the Strategic Planning Advisory Committee to do the research to come up with how to best approach the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. So we spent approximately 2 years researching Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. Mr. Miles in the audience here was part of that at the time, where we figured, we did research of similar communities. You brought up Philadelphia a minute ago. Philadelphia and Geneva are very different in terms of their demographics. So we were looking for communities that were similar to Geneva in the sense of, okay, what is a way that we would be able to go about this and doing it in a meaningful and productive way, and what do we need to learn, and how can we do this in our best practices. So we spent a lot of time doing the research on that, and then we held interviews for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. There were over 40 applicants for the DEI, which was amazing, and I think speaks to how needed and excited everyone in the community was for this process. And then when we went through the interview process, selected the applicants, or selected the candidates, the conversation at that point was, we don't know what we don't know, right? We don't want to move forward because we don't have a framework. We don't want to move forward saying, this is what we think the DEI should do, because at this point, it was still too early for that. We didn't want to make decisions that were arbitrary or too quick without being thoughtful and effortful. So the mission of the DEI in its beginning has been, in 2 years, what can we figure out, and what can we do to determine what direction we need to go? And maybe at the end of 2 years, what we say is, we do need to, the recommendation that the DEI puts forth is we need to have an official role within government. Maybe the recommendation that they make is we need to increase our training or community policing. Maybe the recommendation is we need more time, Maybe the recommendation is, a variety of things. But that's really what these sessions have been here to accomplish, and what these guys have been working on. And that was a little bit about how it was created, if that's helpful.
And I will tell you, too, that I did do a lot of research with the schools because I have 3 children in the school system. We do not have that role in our school system here, which I find very frustrating, and have talked to many other districts that do have it. And I've frankly been told more than once that, we don't need that here. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm on this task force, is because even if we officially don't have any power with the schools, at least we could recommend some things like that. But I can honestly tell you there's none of that representation happening in the school system.
So, my name's Jason. I'm here thanks to Lisa. So I love this conversation, and I wanted to tie a couple things back. I think there's sort of an awareness across the board that part of the problem with moving the needle on this is the cost of inequity is borne by a few, and until everybody else feels it, there's really no need to change. And and to Brian's point, you reach a point where activism takes a different tack. The suggestion was made earlier to get data, and showing the cost that is borne by the city through its current standards, its current practices, would be wonderful. And one of the areas where I think data can show that is around education. And there are communities like Geneva, and if you're looking at scores, you're looking at college acceptance rates, what colleges they go to. My suspicion from what I've seen is you would see open communities, more diverse communities with a demonstrable leg up over Geneva in terms of where those kids are able to go. And boy, wouldn't that be a way to show the costs that are borne community-wide through current practices.
Full disclosure, Jason's from Highland Park. So back to that North Shore conversation, he has a child in that district, and they do things very differently.
Yeah, so Highland Park also has its fair share of challenges. We have Highwood is part of the school district, Fort Sheridan is part of there, and the triggering events, they got heated. So it took the state, or it took the federal government threatening to withhold funds from the kids that we were subsidizing out of Fort Sheridan. That brought people to the meetings, and then the location of where were we going to put that community center? Oh, you want to put it over in our neighborhood? That brought people out too. So the process did get messy. That said, the process did work itself out, and when I look at the level of diversity there at a community that you would not normally think of as diverse, there's a leg up. And when you look at where the kids go to college, same thing with New Trier and some of the other schools over there, that data speaks for itself. So, thanks.
I'm Chuck Miles. Winnie's probably wondering why I sat there that quiet that long. Right. I was on the SPAC committee with Winnie and several others, and I can tell you we really struggled with what to do here. The decision to kind of go ahead and put together this group, I'll give you all a lot of credit and all the 40 people who volunteered for this, because it's a monster to get your arms around. I think part of the challenge, I worked for a large corporation all my life, and we had a lot of diversity training. The issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion is dramatically different than what the diversity training I had all those years was. So kind of my advice, and Ashley and I talked last week for a lot longer than we expected, and your daughter was great, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Is try to find some early successes to help you move this forward. Because if you wait for everything to be perfect, you won't get there. I think Ashley and I talked about, I think one of the first things would be to try to help the community understand what DEI is. Because I'm on another board, and we provide services to people with mental health and developmental disabilities. My experience with diversity training was my organization, Caterpillar, needed to be diverse. I'm now working with an organization, I'm also on the library board here. But we need to now, just like you do, we need to make sure this whole thing, this whole city is thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we are welcoming to everybody, all the residents, not just our elected officials, not just city staff, but everybody needs to kind of get a better understanding of what that is. And I can tell you the library, Ashley and I had a discussion with somebody from the library while we were there, and this is something we need to start working on. We're looking forward to working with you, helping to figure out how this works. Part of the challenge with Geneva is you're a City of Geneva committee. Geneva Township is an overlapping but different organization. The Park District is different. The library is just different. The school district is certainly different. I will also share with you, I had 3 kids that went through Geneva schools. One of my daughter is autistic, and so she had kind of her challenges there. That's another kind of group, I don't even know what word to say, it's not what I meant, but a group that you need to consider that is welcomed. She's very welcomed at the library. That's how I ended up getting stuck at the library board. But I could tell you several years ago, a 2014 graduate from Geneva went out and did a survey of 1,700 Geneva high school graduates. And basically the results of that she presented to the school board, and I think sent Ashley an article on it, was that the school needs to do a better job with diversity, equity, and inclusion, because our students get out and realize that they're pretty, I don't know what the right word is, they're
Ignorant.
They're not as equipped, they're ignorant, they're naive,
Limited.
they're not where they should be as they go into different types of communities. Certainly different than Geneva, because Geneva is Kind of a strange little place, right? So that's, I guess, just my suggestion for the committee is try to find something to get started, or you're going to have the same problem Wendy and I did, is trying to figure out how to get your arms around this whole thing. And it gets frustrating, and you don't feel like you're making progress. And I think there's small things you can do that will help kind of get people on board with what you're trying to do. And then I will be back. I was very involved in the Emma's Landing project, so I will be back May 25th, I think it is. Is that right, Ashley?
Yes.
And we'll talk about how affordable housing and diversified housing in Geneva. So I'm looking forward to that. So thank you for all your work. This is a tough one. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. Or Mr. Miles.
We have Brian online that would like to comment.
Thank you. And I'm going to try to keep my comments general enough to be toward the dais and not toward anyone else. I really would like to implore everyone to not see me or other people of color or people that are different from them as a way to make their communities better. I have my own dreams. I have the things I want to accomplish. I'm not here to make white students' test scores better. And I think this framing is fundamental. And that framing, as it's fundamental, really needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And I do want to thank you. You made a comment when you spoke previously that people of color who assimilate don't just become part of our community, they bring things to our community. And it's such an important message. And it goes back to the whole theory that this country is a melting pot. And we do need to make sure that we're not pandering, as you kind of said, and we are looking at the contributions and how our community, I know you touched on also the character of Geneva. Many residents don't want it to be altered, but it can just move in a different direction that includes more. So thank you. We valued a lot of your comments. We are at 7:35, so we have allocated about another 15 or 20 minutes or so for public comment. Do we have any other comments at this time? Mr. Gregory, did you have something? Oh, I thought you were waving at me. Sorry.
Hey, given an opportunity to speak, yes, I will.
Go ahead.
No, I just want to say that this is great, and this is very refreshing. I've been a resident of Geneva for almost 30 years in Sterling Manor, and didn't realize that so many people felt this way. You know, my wife and I don't have kids, so even though we have helped build a second middle school from Texas, but anyway, that's a different story. No, this is great. One of the things that I want to impress on everyone, and one of the areas that we've talked about before, is that we're not here to just, create policy. We're here to actively do something. So that's why, to your point, taking a piece at a time and doing something about it, that's what we're about. And I reminded Mayor Burns that years ago he knocked on my front door when he was running for mayor the first time, and I said, "Hey, this is something that I've got to be a part of." And I love the community. A lot of good people. I'm an outgoing member of the precinct committee person. Okay, so during the last election was the first time that I got to really walk around parts of my community that I didn't even know existed. And I was very impressed and very surprised by the reaction that I got from ringing doorbells. You look at me, you think, okay, who's this guy? But I just think that we need to continue to move forward and continue to realize that we all bring something to the table. And as long as we embrace that, then everything should work out fine. But we've got to take action. We just can't talk about it.
Thank you. Do you have any other members of the DEI that wanted to make a comment?
I would like to make a comment, and we had the chief of police the last meeting who gave us some information about how they work and how their particular division looks at when they hire people. So I learned quite a bit by that information that he shared with us. Too bad there were not that many people there. But my comment is, everybody has opportunities. The police, the city, Del Nor, everybody has opportunities, the schools. But the one thing, after listening to everyone this evening, I want to share something. Before you look at what maybe some of the employers are doing or can do or should or mandate, whatever you want to call it, it's, why are people in Geneva feeling so uncomfortable when there is someone around that doesn't look like them, doesn't sound like them? And I happen to live very close to a venue that is a happy venue, so we see people of all kind of backgrounds, all skin tones, all ethnicity backgrounds, and they come here, and it's good for Geneva, right? But as long as they go back, that's the perception, as long as they go back where they came from. That's pretty sad, and that happens. And I can see some of my friends or some of my neighbors don't feel comfortable. Sometimes when you do not know enough about someone or somebody's background, you're afraid of what you don't know and you don't understand. And it's very important that we are trying to find out. And some people, some people are just not going to change. It doesn't really matter. They are who they are. But I believe that many people in Geneva today that maybe we don't know really would like to understand other groups better, because sometimes if you don't fear something, then you're comfortable around those people or those students, regardless of who they are. That's my comment.
Thank you, Silva.
Is anybody else online? Would anybody else online like to comment? We have 12, 13 people online.
We never know what tomorrow brings. So a couple of things. As I said earlier, communication is key. And I take a look at all the material that the marketing department puts out, for example. And I think this is my invitation to everyone in this room. Next time you get something from the City of Geneva, flip through the pages, or the Park District, or the library, and identify what you're seeing, or the lack of what we're seeing. So I think the communication, the material, it could use a look through a different lens. Because of the communities I work with, we're really mindful. I usually spend like 48 hours in a community. They have no idea who I am, and I go everywhere. I sit in rooms, I lurch at offices, and people call it stalking, but it's observing. So I really understand the language, the culture, the images, and so that we are able to depict. And the other thing I want to mention to you is, to everyone's point, this is, we wouldn't have opportunities if we didn't have challenges. And so these are some really tremendous opportunities here. And the more stakeholders, that's the terminology that I use, that you can bring around the table to understand, not train, because I can barely train my dog to sit, but to develop people's understanding of what it means to have an open mind. And part of that is the communication that you put out. For example, when we're working with a particular county or a city, and it's a huge project to make sure that we can protect and preserve healthcare infrastructure, for an example, people get fixated on the building and the amount of money it's going to cost to build that new building. What we do is we broaden the lens and say, what are the 4 objectives that we have to protect and advance the healthcare infrastructure in our community, to ensure that we are the best employer, the highest paying employer in the community, to ensure that there's access to quality care. So maybe this committee can be thinking about ways to put this into 4 very inclusive objectives that people can wrap their brain around it. All of these identified areas of focus, I suspect, would fall into those same very tight categories, and that could be a way for you to engage stakeholder groups. Not everyone's going to be interested in ADA, but if the objective was to ensure that everybody with a disability had access to facilities or what have you. So just kind of compartmentalizing it and giving yourself some potential framework by which to engage stakeholders. Thank you, and I promise that's it.
Question for you. So are you saying frame it differently, word it differently, so that if I'm thinking about someone with a disability, I'm not going to necessarily automatically associate that with ADA? Are you saying broaden it?
I would say broaden it, which is to ensure that everyone with different abilities have access to our facilities, whatever that may be. I think about just getting on an airplane these days, and people are waiting, charging, and they say persons who need a little extra time. They used to say people with disabilities. Well, they've expanded that definition for those who need a little extra time. And it takes the stigma away from somebody having a disability. First of all, is the more you can convey language that feels safe for people, because again, we stumble as human beings over our words, because we want to be correct, we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, we want to speak our mind and all this other stuff. So definitions are important, expanding the meaning so that it is more inclusive of those who need a little extra time, for example. And as I said, the framework is to really dial down what are our core objectives here that span the connectivity between all these focus areas. And I promise you, I think you'll find those connections. It'll make it a lot easier for people to digest as well. And the biggest part of this is, in my Forrest Gump life, I worked with a man who helped the Yanomamo Indians in the rainforest. And a Yanomamo Indian looked at me, and whatever his language he said, someone translated, he said, "I see myself in you."
Wow.
We looked nothing alike. We weren't from the same part of the universe, but he said, "I see myself in you." And to me, that is the purest definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Equality is making sure everyone has a bike, but if you're 7 foot tall and you're given a tricycle, that's not exactly equity. And so those are the things that help me keep my mind centered on the terminology of equity, because if we have equity, inclusion is a natural progression from that. So thank you for letting me speak tonight. I appreciate all the work that you're doing.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with us and feeling safe enough to do so. Thank you, Michelle.
We have a comment from online. Robert.
Great, thank you. And thank you to all the speakers, some really great community voice here. I guess my comment is, I'm advocating that we see if a survey can be done in the community on DEI. When I think about my experience in leading an organization with about 200 employees, we found it to be an incredibly helpful way to find direction and focus for our DEI efforts. And I think as a community, we'd see the same thing. What does it mean to people in our community? What does DEI even mean? Do they feel we live in a community that is diverse and embraces that diversity? They believe we live in a community that promotes equity, that's inclusive? And then asking them what areas we think we should focus on. And I think it'll help maybe provide some guidance and priorities, because this is a big topic. There's a lot we could cover. But when we think about what the priorities are in the community and where we can make difference immediately, listening to the community might help. And honestly, I got to say, when we did our DEI surveys, the feedback was incredibly helpful. I think to paraphrase Brian, I think you said you really can't, sometimes you got to get uncomfortable. I had someone tell me that you can't grow unless you get uncomfortable. And when you read feedback from your community members about how we're performing, you get uncomfortable. And that's a good kind of uncomfortable, because that's where we make progress from. So anyway, that's just my advocating. If we can find a way to survey the community, it brings everyone beyond just who's on this call today, but brings the community together, drives awareness about the DEI program, and maybe it'll help, I don't say narrow the focus, but maybe help drive some actionable outcomes that we can work on together. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for your comments. We're coming up to about 7:50. Did we have one or two more comments before we conclude this session?
I would say that I've learned a lot from being here tonight, especially that there's a lot more organizations in Geneva than I ever realized. So if we're looking for ways to make change now, go to these organizations. I guarantee you, if you go to, a senior center and say, where are our problems and what can we do to fix them? They will say, these are some problems. Maybe if we do these things, we can fix them. Let's go to, local churches in the areas. What are the problems? Do you have any, underprivileged people, underrepresented people that are members of your church? How do we help them? Because these organizations and these centers that already exist, we can take advantage of them really easily. I mean, we can do that at the high school through clubs dedicated towards, certain purposes. If we have these, these places I didn't even know existed, like homeowners and banks that are in charge of things, if they already exist, let's use those as resources and ask them for ideas because they are there. They're definitely there, and that's, a group of people that already exists, that has the knowledge, that has the skills, and has the outreach already in place to do a lot more than, what maybe the committee can do on their own.
Thank you so much, Sunny, for your comments, and that's a great idea. And I do want to just mention to everyone who's listening, thank you again for being interested in speaking with us. And if you ever do have a specific area of Geneva that you do know for sure would be willing to talk with us and work with us, or even come in and be a speaker with us, we want to hear from the community as much as possible. So as much as we will be going into the community as well, if community members come to us and they do want to speak at one of our meetings, or they would like to be one-on-one with a member of the DEI, we are all fully open to having as much communication as possible with the community. So thank you, Sunny, so much for pointing that out. And that's very eloquent the way you stated it too. Thank you so much. Did we have one more comment before we wrap up our session?
I have one comment.
Yeah, make sure to turn your mic on.
It was, I probably forgot everything because I'm like sitting here writing down my notes. But to piggyback off of, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
To piggyback off of what Jason was saying, I think one of the other residents, in regards to the schools and their hiring processes, I spoke with a couple of friends that are educators, not necessarily in our area, but I was told that a lot of the minority educators are drawn to the communities like Aurora and Elgin because of the population that they are serving. So while it would be very beneficial to have educators of color in Geneva, they're not needed in Geneva. I think it's doing the students a great disservice because they do go to colleges in these areas that are very diverse, and they'll come across these people and they don't know how to communicate with them. So that was one comment, and that's one thing that I feel really strongly about, especially trying to partner with the schools and the school board. And there was an idea that I had of possibly proposing them getting a minority student liaison, not only for the minority population that we do have in Geneva, but for students, white students that need to, how do I approach these, this person? How do I speak to this person? I mean, it would actually help in fostering relationships amongst different groups of people. That was just one question, one comment. Michelle brought it up, and a couple of the residents online brought up the data collection. I think the one issue that we would have is we may not get as many responses as that we would need to get a larger sample. It will probably be a very small sample, and I mean, you can't get any real meaty data from 10, 20 people responding to a survey. I mean, what is Geneva, over 20,000 people? We need substantial amounts of people to actually respond if we do send out surveys, so that we do get quality data.
That really depends on the survey instrument tool and how it's deployed. So I would say that is not a roadblock at all. If there really is a way to achieve what you're saying, for sure.
Yeah, I think that you probably, with a lot of the younger people, we would obviously have to reach out via social media. That is huge with the younger population. With the older generations, we will probably have to do mail outs. So it's all about determining which routes and how we collect all of it. If we got a lot of data, how we would collect it.
Thank you, Kendra. Thank you. Do we have any other comments before we move on to just have a brief summary and then we can move on to any new business? Does anyone online have anything?
No. Nothing.
Okay. I'd like to thank everyone just once again for all of your comments and for all the time that you've taken. We have definitely recognized within this conversation a lot of themes. Some of them are on our identified areas of focus and some of them are not. And some of them definitely help us define further how our framework will be constructed and what we'll be doing with our areas of focus. And as I said, anytime at any point, if members of the community would like to meet with one of us individually, most of us are, or not, if not all of us are open to that. And we're also open to any community partners that we'd like, that are willing to work with us as well, just to work on those communication pieces of what we can be doing for the community and with initiatives as well, like we have with Saga going on right now. Are we ready to close the listening session for today? Just one last call for any public comment. No. Any comments from the DEI members at this time? Okay. Well, thank you all so much. So we'd like to close our listening session. Did anyone in DEI have any new business that we wanted to discuss before we close our meeting today? Nothing? Okay. We do. we do. We have a lot. We do have a lot. Do we have any other public comment before we close our open meeting at this time from any members of the public? Do we have anything from anyone online for public comment?
No, I don't think so.
Then I think we are ready to adjourn for today. And once again, thank you all and have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you.